So 9 years later, when Francis Scott Key was held aboard his own American truce ship to witness the unrelenting bombardment of Fort McHenry by the British, the fort that guarded the city of Baltimore, Key turned to a tune he knew well to respond to this moment. What I find amazing is Key's own emotional journey during this time. So Key was actually a member of the Georgetown militia. He was part of a artillery company, and he had witnessed and been a soldier at what's known as the Bladensburg races, at the burning of Washington, D.C. It's sort of the most embarrassing moment, if you will, in U.S. military history, when our own capital was seized by a foreign power and all of our government buildings, or almost all of the government buildings, burned to the ground. So he was not optimistic about how things would go at Baltimore, and felt that the British leadership, who he had been negotiating with to have the release of William Beanes, who was his friend and a physician, who was taken prisoner after the Battle of Washington, he thought that they were probably pretty justified in their confidence that they would take Baltimore relatively quickly, as they had Washington, D.C., and that they would probably burn Baltimore to the ground as well. So it was with sort of incredible excitement and joy and relief and pride that he saw the Star-Spangled Banner flying over Fort McHenry the day after the bombardment, after a 25-hour attack on the city of Baltimore, both by land and by sea. What is less known about this event is that Key was then stuck on his boat for 3 days following the bombardment. So after negotiating with the British High Command, he wasn't allowed to leave so that he would not give away any of the British plans for the attack. And likewise, after the battle, when the British fleet was reloading and packing up and turning around, wasn't like a jet plane zipping over Baltimore. They took them 2 full days to turn their fleet around. So Key was stuck on a boat that entire time with nothing to do. What does a poet do when stuck on a boat? For several days, but write a poem, write a lyric, and we are certainly glad that he did, conveying his feelings of that moment. So this is the very first sheet music imprint of the Star-Spangled Banner. It was published under Key's direction, actually, later that same fall, in probably October of 1814. It almost copies exactly the sheet music notation of the Anacreontic song, which we heard at the beginning, which was done in a souvenir edition by the club back in 1779. So this sheet music had made it to the United States, to Carr's Music Shop, and they were commissioned by Mr. Key to put this together, and that's the original text with the original melody that we'll be performing for you now. It's a little different than what we know today, and there's several really important things about this edition. This is the first edition that gives us the title, The Star-Spangled Banner. Up until this time, this poem is known as The Defense of Fort McHenry, but Mr. Carr, I think, sensing a commercial opportunity that something called the Star-Spangled Banner would sell a lot better nationally than something called The Defense of Fort McHenry, that it might become more timeless, that it might use sort of the abstract imagery in Francis Scott Key's lyric about patriotism, about devotion to God, to really transcend the moment, and this new title certainly helped it do that. The other thing that you should know about this piece of music is that it's the most prized and valuable piece of sheet music in the history of music. So the last time this sold at auction was about 2 years ago, and this piece of paper went for $500,000. And if you happen to have a lot of old sheet music in your piano bench at home, you might want to check for this one. And there's a trick I can tell you about how to notice what is exactly the first printing. At this point, we know about a dozen of these survive, and one of them is actually owned here at the University of Michigan in a Clements library. But there's a typo in the subtitle. The letter T is missing, so instead of a patriotic song, it is a periodic song. So go home and check for that, and if you find one, send it to my attention here at the University of Michigan. But we'll be performing this, and I think you're going to hear some connections to that Greek chorus aspect of the Anacreontic song in the way in which Francis Scott Key, again, knowing how this song is performed, and this chorus is actually repeated in published editions here. If we look right there, oops, yeah, that's right. There is the chorus part up at the top. But the community is brought in, so it's meant for a soloist. It's not meant for 100,000 people at Michigan Stadium, but rather it's meant for one particularly talented voice to perform the melody, and then the community responds as the chorus to affirm this call to sort of believe and support the nation. So please join me in welcoming back Scott Piper and our chorus of Americans to perform this original edition of the Star-Spangled Banner.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled